The Arizona Territory in the early 1880s was a place where survival depended on courage, patience, and determination. Endless stretches of desert reached toward distant mountains, while dry winds carried dust across lonely trails used by ranchers, traders, and travelers. Among those isolated ranchers was Ethan Carter, a widowed cowboy in his early 30s, who had spent years rebuilding a quiet life after losing his wife to a deadly fever. His small ranch stood several miles away from the nearest settlement, surrounded by weathered fences, grazing horses, and open grassland. Every sunrise brought another day of hard work, yet every sunset reminded him that silence had become his only companion. Ethan followed the same routine every morning. Before the first light spread across the desert, he saddled his horse, checked the cattle, repaired broken fences, and gathered water from a nearby stream that flowed only during certain seasons. The ranch demanded constant attention because harsh weather could destroy weeks of work in a single afternoon. Although neighbors occasionally stopped by, most days passed without another human voice. The loneliness weighed heavily on him, but he believed honest work was the only way to keep painful memories from consuming his heart. He had learned to accept solitude as part of life on the frontier. That afternoon, the Arizona sun burned hotter than usual, forcing even wild animals to seek shelter beneath scattered mesquite trees. Ethan was repairing a section of fencing damaged by wandering cattle when his horse suddenly became restless. The animal lifted its head, snorted nervously, and stared toward a rocky hillside. Ethan paused, sensing something unusual hidden among the shimmering waves of heat. Grabbing his canteen, he slowly walked across the dry ground, expecting to find an injured traveler or perhaps a frightened animal. Instead, he noticed a faint trail of footprints leading toward a cluster of large desert rocks. Behind those rocks lay an exhausted young woman who looked no older than 18. Her traditional Apache clothing was covered in dust, with several tears caused by cactus thorns and rough terrain. Her long black hair hung loosely over her shoulders, and her face showed clear signs of exhaustion after days without proper food or water. She tried to stand when she noticed Ethan approaching, but her legs failed beneath her. Fear filled her dark eyes as she instinctively stepped backward, expecting another hostile settler instead of someone willing to help. Every movement revealed how weak and dehydrated she had become. For several quiet moments, neither of them spoke. Ethan knew the history between settlers and Apache tribes had created generations of distrust, and one careless movement could frighten her even more. Rather than stepping closer, he slowly placed his rifle on the ground several feet away before kneeling. He uncorked his canteen and gently slid it across the sand toward her without saying a word. The young woman stared at him cautiously before reaching for the water. She drank only a few careful sips at first, as though uncertain whether she could trust the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Once she regained a little strength, Ethan offered her a small piece of bread and dried beef from his saddlebag. She accepted quietly, still avoiding direct conversation. He asked for her name and whether she had family nearby, but she simply lowered her eyes without answering. It was clear that fear and uncertainty prevented her from revealing anything about herself. Ethan realized forcing questions would accomplish nothing. Instead, he calmly told her she would be safe at his ranch until she recovered. His voice carried no anger or suspicion, only genuine concern for someone who desperately needed help. The journey back to the ranch was slow because the young Apache woman barely had enough strength to remain on horseback. Ethan walked beside his horse for much of the trip, allowing her to ride while he guided the animal across the rocky trails. As evening approached, golden sunlight stretched across the Arizona landscape, painting the distant mountains in shades of orange and red. When they finally reached the ranch, Ethan prepared a warm meal, filled a basin with clean water, and offered her a comfortable room inside the small wooden house. For the first time in days, she was surrounded not by danger, but by peace. As darkness settled over the desert, Ethan sat quietly on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one above the endless frontier. Inside the house, the mysterious Apache girl finally rested without fear, slowly recovering from whatever desperate journey had brought her there. Ethan understood that someone would eventually come searching for her, and he knew that moment could bring trouble to his isolated ranch. Yet he never considered sending her away. Deep within his heart, he believed helping another human being was always worth the risk. He had no idea that the person destined to arrive in the coming days would change his life forever and awaken emotions he believed had been buried with his past. 3 peaceful days passed at Ethan Carter's ranch, and the young Apache woman slowly regained her strength. She finally introduced herself as Nayeli, though she still spoke very little about what had happened. Ethan never pressured her for answers. He simply continued caring for the horses, repairing fences, and making sure she had enough food and water. On the morning of the 4th day, the sound of galloping horses echoed across the valley. Ethan stepped onto his porch and saw several Apache riders approaching in an organized line. At their head rode a proud and fearless woman dressed in beautifully crafted buckskin clothing decorated with fine beadwork and eagle feathers. Her steady eyes searched every corner of the ranch until they rested on the young woman standing safely beside Ethan. She was Ayanna, Nayeli's mother, who had spent days searching across the Arizona territory after her daughter became separated from her people during a violent sandstorm. Ayanna had prepared herself for the worst. For years, she had witnessed settlers treat her people with suspicion and cruelty, so she expected another painful confrontation. Instead, she found her daughter healthy, smiling and standing beside a man who had asked for nothing in return. Nayeli ran toward her mother, and the two embraced with tears of relief. The Apache riders quietly lowered their weapons, realizing the cowboy had protected one of their own instead of harming her. Ayanna stepped forward and sincerely thanked Ethan for his compassion. Although trust did not appear overnight, respect was born that morning. Before leaving, Ayanna promised that neither Ethan nor his ranch would ever be forgotten by her people. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Yet Ethan often found himself thinking about the proud Apache woman whose strength was matched only by her kindness. Their paths crossed again when Ethan delivered supplies to a trading post near tribal lands. Ayanna greeted him warmly, no longer as a stranger but as a trusted friend. They spent hours talking about the changing frontier, the hardships both settlers and Apache families faced, and the hope that peace could replace endless conflict. With every meeting, they discovered they shared the same values: honesty, loyalty, courage, and a deep love for family. The walls built by years of fear slowly disappeared, replaced by understanding that neither had expected to find. One autumn afternoon, news spread that a ruthless gang of outlaws had begun attacking travelers along a nearby trail. Without hesitation, Ethan joined several Apache warriors led by Ayanna to protect innocent families crossing the territory. Working side by side, they tracked the criminals through rocky canyons and dry riverbeds before finally stopping the gang without allowing more lives to be lost. The successful rescue earned respect from settlers and tribal leaders alike. For the first time in many years, people from both communities witnessed what could happen when courage replaced hatred and cooperation replaced prejudice. Ethan and Ayanna became living proof that trust could accomplish far more than violence ever could. As the seasons changed, their friendship quietly blossomed into love. Ethan admired Ayanna's wisdom, compassion, and determination, while Ayanna saw in Ethan a man whose heart was stronger than any weapon he carried. With the blessing of her daughter Nayeli and the approval of tribal elders, Ayanna chose to build a new future beside the cowboy who had once rescued a frightened young girl in the desert. Together, they cared for the ranch, welcomed travelers in need, and became respected by both settlers and Apache families throughout the region. Their remarkable story spread across the American frontier as a reminder that true courage is measured not by battles won, but by kindness shown when fear and prejudice demand otherwise. Long after their time had passed, people still remembered the cowboy who opened his home to a lost Apache girl, and in doing so found the love that changed his life forever.